There's a silence that only a man who lives alone can hear. It's the sound of four walls echoing back his own thoughts, the kind of silence that cuts deeper than noise. No laughter in the kitchen, no soft voice asking how his day was, no warmth when he walks through the door. Just him, his breath, his grind, and the weight of knowing he carries his world alone. Most men fear this silence because it forces them to confront who they really are. It strips away distractions, it removes comfort, and it leaves only truth. But here's the paradox. This silence is also the fire that can forge greatness. A man without a woman beside him is forced to either collapse under loneliness or rise into a version of himself so powerful, so unbreakable, that the world cannot ignore him. When there's no one to lean on, he becomes the one others lean on. When there's no comfort, he becomes his own strength. Living alone without a woman isn't weakness. It's the crucible where men either destroy themselves or build empires. Loneliness is not something most people can endure because it strips away the illusions they hide behind. When a man is alone, he has no audience, no applause, no woman to reassure him, and no distractions to validate his existence. In that silence, all that remains is his reflection staring back at him, and that reflection doesn't lie. It shows him his flaws, his wasted time, his lack of discipline, his unspoken fears, and the life he hasn't yet built. This is why most men escape loneliness with noise, with temporary pleasures, with fake relationships, or meaningless conversations. But the man who learns to embrace this solitude, who looks into that reflection without running away, is forced to confront himself at the rawest level. That confrontation becomes the first step to transformation, because the truth is that growth only begins when comfort ends. A man who spends time alone begins to realize that solitude is not an enemy but a mirror. Every day he spends without distraction becomes a battlefield against weakness. He notices how easily he slips into procrastination, how tempting it is to waste hours with nothing to show for it, how much his body craves comfort instead of discipline. And this realization cuts deep, because when there is no one to impress, no one to hold him accountable, the only judge is himself. That is where strength begins. A man who can force himself to rise early without anyone pushing him, who can train his body without a partner to encourage him, who can work on his craft without applause. This is the man who learns real strength. Because strength is not about lifting weights in front of a crowd, it is about carrying the weight of your own solitude without crumbling under it. Loneliness is where self-discipline is born. A man who accepts that no one is coming to save him learns that he must save himself. When there is no one waiting at home, no one caring about whether he succeeds or fails, his decisions gain a new weight. He starts to realize that every action he takes is either building him into someone powerful or breaking him into someone weaker. This sharpens his choices. He begins to eat better, train harder, read more, and think deeper, not because anyone is watching, but because he knows he is responsible for his future. That responsibility feels heavy in the beginning, but it also becomes addictive. The man who learns to enjoy the grind in silence becomes unstoppable when the noise of life arrives, because he has already prepared his foundation in the quiet hours that no one else could endure. In solitude, a man begins to build his own empire brick by brick. While others are distracted with shallow pleasures, he is refining himself. He discovers new skills, develops new ideas, and invests his energy into pursuits that elevate his value. The world cannot see this process happening, but the results speak later. That is the essence of strength built in loneliness. Muscles are grown when no one is watching. Skills are sharpened when no one is clapping. Ideas are born when no one is listening. The man who learns to focus without external validation becomes far more dangerous than the one who constantly relies on motivation from others. This is why many great men throughout history were forged in solitude. They turned their isolation into fire and used it to burn away weakness until only steel remained. Loneliness is also the place where a man learns emotional control. Without anyone to share his struggles with, he must process his pain internally. There is no shoulder to cry on, no comforting voice to ease the storm, so he learns to become his own strength. Instead of drowning in emotions, he begins to channel them, Anger becomes fuel for action, sadness becomes clarity, frustration becomes discipline. This ability to regulate emotions alone makes him nearly unshakable in the outside world, because if a man can survive his darkest nights with no one there to rescue him, what can the world possibly throw at him that he cannot handle? Strength born from solitude is different. It is deeper, calmer, and more permanent. It's not a performance, it's survival turned into mastery. A man who learns to live alone without weakness also gains a sharper mind. When silence surrounds him, he hears thoughts most people drown out. He questions his beliefs, re-examines his ambitions, and analyzes his failures. That mental clarity is only possible when distractions are stripped away. And in that clarity, he discovers a truth that others never reach. Strength is not about never falling. It is about building the mental resilience to rise again and again. The mind trained in solitude becomes sharper than any blade because it has cut through boredom, loneliness, and self-doubt without external help. Such a man doesn't fear being alone anymore, he welcomes it. He knows that solitude is his laboratory, where he experiments, where he creates, where he evolves. Finally, loneliness forces a man to understand the value of his own presence. Most people chase others to fill their emptiness, but the man who thrives alone discovers that he is enough. He doesn't seek constant validation or shallow attention because he has built a foundation of inner strength. He doesn't crumble when a woman leaves, when friends disappear, or when life isolates him, because he has already walked through that fire and emerged stronger. This doesn't mean he rejects people, but it means he is not dependent on them. He can walk alone, he can stand alone, and that makes him more powerful in relationships, in business, and in life. Loneliness has trained him to become self-sufficient, disciplined, and resilient. The kind of man who no longer fears the silence because he has turned it into strength. The greatest battle a man will ever fight is not against the world, not against enemies, not even against the people who doubt him. It is against himself. Inside every man is a war zone filled with laziness, fear, distraction, and weakness. Most men never win this war because it requires brutal honesty. To conquer yourself, you must face the reality that you are often your own worst enemy. It is not the system, not society, not women, not the world holding you back. It is the excuses you make when you hit snooze, the hours you waste scrolling, the habits you cling to that destroy your potential. Self-conquest begins when a man admits that he has been sabotaging himself, when he accepts that the enemy is not external but internal. Only then can he begin the process of turning weakness into strength and chaos into control. When a man chooses self-conquest, he chooses pain over comfort. It's easy to stay in bed, it's easy to eat junk food, it's easy to talk instead of act. But easy choices produce weak men, and weak men have no power. Power belongs to the man who chooses the harder path, the disciplined path, the path that burns in the moment, but builds strength for the future. Every morning he rises when his body begs him to sleep. Every workout he pushes through when his mind screams to stop. Every hour he grinds when his heart longs for rest. This constant resistance against his own nature is where true strength is born. Self-conquest is nothing glamorous. It's dirty, painful, silent work. But it transforms a man into someone unrecognizable, someone capable of commanding his life instead of being controlled by it. Self-conquest also demands that a man learns to master his emotions. Anger, fear, sadness, jealousy. These emotions destroy weak men because they react impulsively. They lash out, they quit, they crumble. But the man who conquers himself doesn't let emotions dictate his actions. He feels them, acknowledges them, and then bends them to his will. Anger becomes fuel for ambition. Fear becomes energy for preparation. Sadness becomes wisdom for clarity. This control is what separates men who are slaves to their emotions from men who use emotions as weapons. A man who has mastered himself cannot be manipulated, cannot be easily broken, and cannot be thrown off his path. That level of control creates power others cannot comprehend because it is rooted in inner stability that no external storm can shake. Discipline is the crown jewel of self-conquest. Without discipline, dreams remain fantasies. With discipline, impossible goals become inevitable. Discipline means doing what must be done whether you feel like it or not. Most men are prisoners to their moods. They act only when inspired. But the man who has conquered himself understands that feelings are irrelevant. He doesn't wait for motivation, he creates it through action. This ability to act in the absence of desire is what makes him untouchable. While others are controlled by the highs and lows of their emotions, he is consistent, relentless, and unbreakable. Every day he sharpens his discipline, and every day he becomes harder to stop. When discipline governs a man's life, he no longer needs to hope for success. It becomes the natural result of his daily choices. Another layer of self-conquest is controlling desires. The world is filled with temptations, cheap pleasures, shallow distractions, instant gratification. Most men chase these and spend their lives weak and empty. But the man who conquers himself learns to delay gratification, to sacrifice the moment for the long term, to refuse temptations that weaken him. He trains his body instead of indulging it. He invests instead of wasting. He builds instead of consuming. By mastering desire, he gains freedom because no addiction owns him, no craving dictates him, and no pleasure controls him. This freedom gives him power in every area of life. The man who can say no to himself becomes the man who can say yes to greater opportunities. He is no longer a slave to his impulses, he is the master of them. That mastery sets him apart, because while the masses are addicted to weakness, he thrives in strength. Self-conquest leads to vision. When a man is no longer distracted by his own weaknesses, his mind becomes clear. He begins to see his purpose with precision. He is no longer lost in confusion, no longer wandering aimlessly, because he has conquered the chaos within. That clarity allows him to move with direction while others stumble in circles. He sets goals and pursues them with conviction. He plans his moves, he executes them, and he adjusts with intelligence. His life no longer belongs to chance. It belongs to design. This ability to create and control his own path is the essence of power. A man who conquers himself doesn't wait for opportunities to appear. He builds them. He doesn't wait for permission. He takes it. He doesn't fear obstacles. He welcomes them, because once you control yourself, nothing outside of you can truly stop you. Finally, self-conquest creates influence. A man who has mastered himself radiates power that others cannot ignore. People are drawn to his energy, his discipline, his presence, because it represents something rare in this world, authentic strength. Women respect him, men admire him, and even enemies are forced to acknowledge him. He doesn't need to beg for attention, his very existence commands it. His power doesn't come from money, status, or external validation. It comes from within. And because it comes from within, it cannot be taken away. This is the ultimate form of power, not control over others, but control over yourself, because when you master yourself, you can master anything else. Self-conquest is the foundation upon which empires are built, legacies are written, and greatness is achieved. It is the proof that a man's true power will always come from the strength he forges in silence against himself every single day. In the end, life will test every man in ways he never expects. It will strip him of comfort, it will isolate him in silence, and it will force him to face the one enemy he can never escape: himself. Loneliness is not a punishment, it is the forge where iron becomes steel. It is in that silence that you build discipline, sharpen focus, and create the strength to endure storms no one else could survive. And once you've mastered the silence, the next battle is within self-conquest. To conquer yourself is to claim power over your mind, your emotions, your desires, and your habits. That is the greatest victory a man can ever achieve, because once you rule yourself, nothing in the external world has the power to rule you. The man who embraces loneliness and masters self-conquest becomes unstoppable. He is no longer dependent on approval, no longer chained by weakness, and no longer afraid of standing alone. He rises with a clarity, a confidence, and a strength that radiates into every aspect of his life. This is the path of true power, the power not given by the world, but forged in silence, earned in discipline, and proven through self-mastery. So, to every man listening, embrace your solitude, Fight your inner battles and rise into the version of yourself the world cannot ignore. Thank you for your time. Stay disciplined, stay strong, and God bless you all.